You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
All right, it's the Storm Tracker podcast here. I am Marcus Benjamin, and I'm joined today by the man, the myth, the legend, Larry Blustein. Now, if you don't know who Larry is, then you just don't know about high school football in the area, or are very privy to that type of thing. But Larry is kind enough to join me today to talk a little spring football. We've got spring practice coming up for the Miami Hurricanes, and just wanted to have a quick discussion with my guy Blue. How's it going, man?
Good. Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate you having us in. And obviously, Miami's taking it right down to the wire. Just got themselves coordinators, still have a couple of coaching spots to fill, but at least they got the coordinators. At least they got to put in, some new wrinkles, and spring's going to be very, very important.
Yeah, as it always is. And you did allude to it, that Miami added a couple of new coordinators, have yet to hire a wide receivers coach. We'll see what happens. From what we hear, that is supposed to be happening this week, and it would be ideal because you got Junior Day coming up on March 4th, and then just kind of want to have coaches in place for spring practice. But last year was a tumultuous one for the Hurricanes and Cristobal in year one. It was tough, and I think Cristobal went through some growing pains, and as a result, a lot of coaches have departed, and Miami will have to, I guess, reinvent the culture that they created last season. But in your honest opinion, Blue, what do you think went wrong last season?
Well, I've been watching Miami, back since the middle 60s, and I've seen some teams that were, okay, and I've seen some teams that were not okay. Last year had been one of the worst rosters they've ever had. I mean, they had barely had frontline players, let alone depth. And when you have your quarterback, your chief quarterback, a guy that you counted on go down and not very healthy throughout the year, then you had your go-to guy on offense, your slot guy, and Xavier Restrepo go down. You weren't very deep on the offensive line. You had no playmakers as receivers. On and off with the kid Young. There was no consistency. Your running back, you were down to a walk-on as a guy who was a backup and saw extensive playing time. So from the offensive standpoint, not a very good roster. And I mean, you could blame everybody in the world for it, but just the fact that, you can't blame Mario Cristobal. He inherited this. There was nothing he could really do other than watch it play out. Defensively, you're looking at a team that gave up 40.6 times. I don't ever remember that happening. I mean, and it wasn't to great teams either. I mean, you did it to a Middle Tennessee State team. You did it to a Florida State team that last year was probably in as bad a shape as Miami was. They couldn't buy a win, and then all of a sudden they turned things around. They had no consistent pass rush. They had maybe two linebackers, and you were relying on a freshman and Wesley Bassaint to step up. Your defensive secondary was good, but it wasn't outstanding. So in a nutshell, your team and your roster just was not good. And that was a major, major problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Cristobal saw that, and he kind of said that in several press conferences, or kind of paraphrased it, saying that there was a monstrosity of a gap, and there's basically talent deficiencies on this roster, and he's done his best to really kind of fix that issue with bringing in talent via the transfer portal, bringing in talent with recruiting. Has a top 10 class going into this 2023 season. So I think he's done a good job of addressing those issues. And the issues also were probably up top with the coaches. And I think that's kind of part of the reason why we saw some coaches leave. And now we've got some new coordinators in the fold. We've got Shannon Dawson, who is another one of those disciples from the air raid offense. So we expect to see the ball flying around. At least the Hurricanes fans are expecting that from that type of offense. And then you've got Lance Guidry, who comes in with a ton of experience and that experience in recruiting the Louisiana and Mississippi, South Texas area. So that is something for Hurricanes fans to definitely get excited about. What do you expect from this offense first in 2023?
Well, first of all, you alluded to a lot of the coaches. You had a lot of big name guys, guys who brought in with them, some past like Coach Steele, who had been here and also on offense. I mean, you had a few guys who, had Coach Gaddis, who was undoubtedly one of the best assistants coming in. But what you didn't have was teachers. You had all these people who promise, they're going to be great recruiters. But you know as well as I do, Marcus, recruiting takes care of itself when you win. And the one thing I remember when Mario Cristobal was hired, the one thing that he said, and it kind of stuck with me, he says, we're looking for guys on this coaching staff to elevate the talent, to bring these guys to where we think that they could be. And they certainly didn't have that last year. And that was a major problem. So by bringing in especially like we're concentrating on offense, and you look at a Coach Dawson who's innovative, all the players who played for him respect him, and they look forward to going out and playing. And I think that's going to be a huge difference because of the offense. It's in some ways it's still the same. You still have Frank Latson. You still have Jacoby George. Both of them were given ample time to step up and make a difference last year. And they, for the most part, they didn't. Either did Michael Redding. And guys like that you really need. Kobe Young made an impression, but he was too inconsistent. So he kind of fell into the entire the direction that the team was going. Last year, obviously, a Will Mallory, who I still think that Will Mallory will fall in line with a Chantrell Henderson and a Sam Shields and become a much better player when he gets to the next level, which is sad, but sometimes it happens. He's the type of guy that I think that some of his best games last year or the last 2 years, he made some really great plays, but they were all called back. So he really never made an impression. But you have guys like Elijah Arroyo. You have people like Cam McCormick, who's like an eighth-year player. You have Jaleel Skinner, who they could use at a lot of options because he's a tall guy with a lot of speed. So he could create some mismatches, even going at the wide receiver position. Absolutely. Quarterback, if he stays healthy, Tyler Van Dyke is as good as you get. But if he doesn't, they're in trouble. It's just because of the fact that Ja'Cory Brown isn't the type of guy that's going to pick up this offense. He doesn't have the experience, off the bat. Picked up a lot of valuable playing time. Running back-wise, I think they're in really good hands. They're a year away from being one of the best running back group maybe in the country. They have, if Chaney can stay healthy, and I know it's a big if because he hasn't done it, but he's a guy that can grind out some yards for you, give you some good playing time, along with Parrish. And the one thing about Henry Parrish, and, you look at a guy who's 175 pounds, and you look at guys like that, they're used to bouncing plays outside. But he doesn't do that. He runs tackle to tackle, which is great because he utilizes, not only his quickness, but his durability. And he does. I know he got hurt a little bit last year. We haven't even taken the wrapper off Trevante Citizen, who I think has got a load of talent. And then you have incoming freshmen, a guy like, I don't have to tell you, you've seen Mark Fletcher play. This is a guy that is virtually a Big Ten back because he runs downhill, but somebody that could, create a lot of situation. Then you have Chris Johnson, who I think still has a lot to learn as a running back, but you get him in space in some way, jet sweep, returns, and this kid can make a difference. And to me, when you look at up front, and they've had problems, but if you get something out of Zion Nelson, if you get something out of Jalen Rivers, those are two guys who I think have the potential. Even though even though you look at Jalen and he's a young guy, he certainly has a lot of potential. But to me, it's the new guys, Marcus, that are coming in. The Matthew Lee, the Javion Cohens, the Francis Mauagoas, the Samson Okunlola. Those type of guys, and you don't want to rely on freshmen, but you do have a guy in Javion Cohen who's a senior. You have somebody like Lee who's a senior. So I think with them, combined with Rivers and Nelson, you've got the nucleus of something special. So from an offensive standpoint, I think they're a whole lot better depth-wise. You still got Lawrence Seymour, a big baby out of Central. You have Jonathan Dennis, who had some experience at Oregon, used to play in South Florida. You have Cooper, Inez Cooper, who came on, last year. You have Matthew McCoy. I think from that standpoint, you look at that plus a healthy Xavier Restrepo. Still need somebody on the outside. Still need somebody to come in the huddle, like they did the year before or the year before that, and say, hey, listen, get it to me. I'll beat that guy. And they don't have that guy yet. But I think during the spring, that's where everything can be uncovered, whether they move Jaleel Skinner outside, because as well as I do, everything's based on productivity. And you could have all the, the promise you want, like Jacoby George does, and like Michael Redding does, and Brashard Smith and those guys. But if you don't live up to it, and that's the one thing too. And when we get to the defensive standpoint, I mean, everybody always wants to knock a guy like Corey Flagg, but he's been your leading tackler the last 2 years. So how can you get all over a guy like that? It's all about productivity and the offensive side of the ball. You were at every game, you saw. They just got nothing off of that offense, any consistency. The offensive line was getting pushed back. They were too predictable. They never really threw up field. So if you're a defensive coordinator, you're going into that game going, oh, this should be an easy task, because they're not throwing with any regularity upfield. And then when Ja'Cory Brown came in, there was no way they were going to throw upfield. He just wasn't used to it.
Yeah, I think the personnel just wasn't matching the scheme last season. And this season, you're going to see a scheme that's matching what the Hurricanes have. And you kind of mentioned all the guys that should be stepping up.
Right.
And I think this team actually has a little bit more depth, where if they go and get bitten by the injury bug again, that they'll be able to sustain some level of success. You mentioned like a player like Jonathan Dennis, who may not start, but he may get his opportunity if one of those players on the offensive line. Same with possibly Inez Cooper. Has a possibility to possibly start on that offensive line. But it all comes down for me is Tyler Van Dyke, man.
100%.
Are we going to see the Tyler Van Dyke of 2021 when he went on that crazy run? And in this offense, Shannon Dawson has basically averaged around 3,000 yards passing with his quarterbacks in the last few years at Houston. So if we get anything close to that type of production from Tyler Van Dyke, then this team is going to be able to score points and not going to be blown out by 40 points like we saw last season. So we'll see what happens.
But you made a good point. I mean, and I reiterated it early. It all falls on Van Dyke. If he's not healthy or he's not in the lineup, they're hurting. I mean, they're hurting, definitely hurting. And you bring up some of the playmakers from 2021. You had a guy like Rambo who was catching 9 and 10 balls a game and stretching the field and giving an opportunity for your tight ends to go over the middle and your running backs to come out of the backfield, which if you look at Houston's offense, that's how they ran. They
Yeah.
got, they got their running back out of the backfield. He had over 1,000 yards. He had 99 catches. So
Yeah.
that's a precursor of what this offense is going to be about. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be ball control, but at the same time, eating up a lot of yards. And that, as you pointed out, that didn't happen last year because you didn't have a go-to guy on the outside. You didn't have a consistent offensive line that if Rivers went out, you didn't have anybody to really plug in without getting torn up against some really good competition that they played on defense.
Yeah, this offense did not have a go-to guy. There's no one player as Miami teams have in the past that you could say this is the most explosive guy on the field, either team that can really kind of, stretch the field and put some fear in the heart of a defense. And there wasn't a guy like that at all last season.
Right.
I mean, partially that's because Xavier Restrepo was injured most of the year. But he is not the fastest guy in the world or even on the team.
Right.
So if he does go down, you want to see a Jacoby George or Brashard Smith really kind of step into a role where they can be depended upon, just like X was or was supposed to be last season. So
sure.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of questions for this offense, and we'll get the breakout players in a second. But let's touch on the defense a little bit. Lance Guidry, he comes in here, and he's going to have an aggressive defense, very similar to what we saw last season. But there will be a focus on the defensive backfield because he's got a defensive background. So I expect the big, huge plays that we saw given up last season that will be eliminated because he's more of a defensive back minded type of coach. And
right.
The defensive backfield is probably one of the strongest on this team with Cameron Kinchens, and hopefully you get a healthy James Williams back and Devontae Brown from UCF, one of the best corners in college football as far as efficiency last season, according to Pro Football Focus. But overall, what do you think this defense will look like, Blue? And what are you expecting from the Hurricanes, Steve?
Well, you made a good point. Okay. The secondary is going to be good, but for them to be good, you got to get pressure. Jafari Harvey is one of those guys. I think Nigel Kelly, this is a year where he could really step up and make a difference. It's going to be all about depth. We know you have Leonard Taylor. Does Thomas Gore, is he a guy that could get in the mix and, kind of make a difference? Is Branson Dean a guy that can make a difference? Harrison Hunt, who I loved last year. He just, he was just kind of feeling his way in. And a guy who really came to play every single day or every single week was Akeem Mesidor. I mean, he was a big time plus to this team. Chance Williams, who we really haven't had an opportunity to see a whole lot of. So when you're talking about up front, you have a great mix of guys that with an aggressive style of defense, as you mentioned, that a Coach Guidry brings to the table, then it makes it a lot easier for your linebackers. Because I had said before, Corey Flagg Jr., okay, so he's an undersized guy, but he continues to lead. He's around the ball at all times. And this year, with the addition of Francis Mauigoa, who's got plenty of potential, a guy like Wesley Basaint, I think he had the baptism under fire last year. Keontra Smith, who made plays last year as well. Sure. I think it becomes an easier job when you have a lot more depth than you did last year. I mean, you won't have to rely on Wesley making all the plays or Corey Flagg. I think that just watching Francisco Mauigoa, what he's potential of doing, he's a big time kid. And I think that he's got an opportunity to do some really good things. And then you set the table, like you said, for a Devontae Brown or a James Williams or a Cameron Kinchens or a Darryl Porter, or a Takori Couch, and then you have depth behind them, with a Markeith Williams and Terry Robertson and the kid Jaden Harris, and then some of the newcomers that are going to come in. And that's the one thing on both sides of the ball. A lot of those newcomers are going to make a huge difference. not as starters, because you can't do that. You can't bring in 7 freshmen and say, okay, you start, because then all of a sudden you go back in the day when, somebody like Duke Johnson and Tracy Howard were thrust into a position of leadership when they were 17 and 18 years old. And you can't win like that. But I will tell you, I think as you pointed out, the depth on the offense is predicated on the offensive line, which has been drastically improved. And then, as you said, you could filter in Francis Mauigoa and Okunlolo and guys like that, to make it stronger. Same thing on the defensive side. A lot of these newcomers, I think, have an opportunity to help. But I think the front 7 is going to be a whole lot deeper. It's going to be a whole lot better, and it's going to be more aggressive. And you're going to see, instead of, Steele sucking on his thumb, to be more aggressive, to bring the house, to disguise defensive coverages. And that's got to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really excited for this linebacking core. This is a team historically in the past couple of years were abysmal at tackling, and they improved a little bit last season, but still not at the level where you want to see this team to be. And they brought in some guys, some young guys, and you also mentioned, Francisco Mauigoa, the brother of Francis Mauigoa. So a couple Mauigoas to add to some depth to this team. It makes me wonder, like, who is going to be those 2 starting linebackers, because you've got so much depth now. I can't imagine like any one of these freshmen would start over Wesley Basaint or Francisco Mauigoa. But
those are your 2, I think.
Yeah, but my question really is Corey Flagg, like you mentioned. I mean, he's been kind of the heart and soul, so to speak, of this defense. Probably the smartest guy when it comes to managing the defense in the middle. Where does he kind of fit in? If you got, players that I would say are more athletic and bigger than him in a Francisco Mauigoa and a Wesley Basaint. I would imagine it's going to be somewhat of a rotation, just like last season. But the majority of the reps, I feel it's going to be Wesley Basaint and Mauigoa.
Yeah. Oh, well, and then isn't it going to come down to production again? If you're missing tackles and you're not getting the job done, next man will step up. And isn't it nice to know that you have a guy like Corey Flagg, who is a proven playmaker, just in case things go south, that he can come in and play more extensive, action. And I think during the spring, that's the one thing that I'm sure that Coach Guidry wants to get a look at, and Coach Nicholson wants to get a look at, what they could expect out of these linebackers. And I think it's very, very important that, and I keep telling, everybody, that spring is so vital. It's vital for everybody, but this year it's so vital because you don't want to come back in the summer with those same questions. You want to at least have a good basis. And that's why with both coordinators, that the last 2.5 weeks since they've been hired, they've never left the office. All they've done is get to know the personnel, watch what they're capable of, have some meetings with them. And that's been essential, because when they get out there over the weekend, for the first time, they've got to have some game plan. They can't dawdle the first couple of practices away. They have to have a purpose. As you just said, every day I would, if I'm him, I'd have a board, and my board would shift. And if Mauigoa has a off day and Corey Flagg has a good day, he gets into that position. And I think that's every school does that. Even Alabama, if you're at the end of the day, they have a performance chart. And whoever's at the top of that list at the end of the spring will go in the summer, as somebody that needs to get beaten out, or he stays there. It's the only way you could do it. And I think that if you look at the track record Guidry has, and talking to some of the people that have coached with him and played under him, he's a fiery guy that will get everything out of you. And, we sat up in the press box sometime, and it was almost sickening the whole game. The most animated person on the field was your head coach. And it shouldn't always be like that. You should have your defensive coordinators or your defensive coaches jumping around and, getting these kids pumped up and make sure that here's the thing. And you could put the blame on coaching to a certain extent because their job, Marcus, is to get these guys ready, to put them in the place to make the plays. They don't make the plays. It can't always be about the defensive coaches or the offensive coaches. It's got to sometimes lay with the player.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of like players really kind of jumping out or going to the top of the board, spring is really to see who those players are. Like which players are just going to pop off the screen or off of Green Tree practice field. And there's a lot of candidates out there that are going to be breakout players because there were some players last year who had some hype going into fall camp, and for whatever reason, whether it be due to injury or just not being able to get any playing time, didn't really show what they could do. In your opinion, which players do you think have a chance to really have a breakout spring?
Well, I'll start with a guy who's a veteran on the offensive side. And I think Javion Cohen is a guy that really has an opportunity at a position of need. Somebody who could rally the team. He's been in 44 games already at the collegiate level, which is twice as much as any other offensive lineman on that side of the ball. So I think on the offensive side of the ball, I look at him as being that leader, as being somebody that Okunlola and Francis Mauigoa will have an opportunity to learn from. They will also have an opportunity to learn from Cam McCormick, who's been around a long time. And, at least he's from a maturity standpoint, maybe not talent-wise, but for somebody who's been there, done that, I think your older players, especially on the offensive side of the ball, I think that, and I'll tell you a guy on defense that I think if he shows what he could do in spring, he could be the breakout player of the year, and that's Nigel Kelly. I mean, this kid, you and I watched him several times in high school, and this cat gained a lot of weight. He's long, he's quick, and I think he could have a hugely breakout year.
Yeah, definitely good ones. Definitely good ones, Blue. For me, on offense, I think Isaiah Horton really has a chance to really break out this spring. I'm going to give you two on offense, but Isaiah Horton, because he really started to flash at last fall camp. I don't know if you remember, Blue, but he was out there making all kinds of plays, and then unfortunately he suffered an injury that, unfortunate for him, kind of shortened his season. So I expect big things from him in the spring, and I think he's going to be a surprise to some, in the passing game. And another player on offense is Jaleel Skinner. I think he is an absolute freak of an athlete. I mean, and you really haven't seen him show that as of yet. And I think this is the opportunity for him to really show what he can do, especially in this offense. And you alluded to this earlier. They could put him out at wideout, line him up in the slot, or maybe line him up all the way outside. He's got that type of ability, and we just haven't quite seen it just yet. We've seen some flashes of it last season, but not to the level that we saw coming out of high school. And I think this is going to be the spring where we see exactly the what the ceiling could be. And on defense, I think it's a guy that you talked about earlier as well as a transfer in Francisco Mauigoa. I really think he is going to break out and show like, wow, okay, well, this guy can really, drag down these tacklers and be a factor even in the passing game. And last season for Washington State, he made plays in the passing game. So I think he's really going to show people why he was sought after, and I think he's going to make a big difference for this defense. But I love Nigel Lee Kelly too. I mean, Nigel Lee Kelly, when he came out, I was telling people, I believe I told you as well, is that I thought he was the best defensive end in South Florida at the time. And at the time, it was Stewart. It was the guy from American Heritage. His name escapes me at the time. He went to Georgia.
Yeah.
Uh,
Jones, not Marvin Jones was
Mark. Yeah.
Marvin Jones Jr. Yeah.
Yeah, Marvin Jones Jr. So I thought he was better than those two guys. And I would go into, back and forth with people about that. But I love Nigel Lee Kelly, and he's just got a motor that I think will help this team win games and shut down offenses. So so overall, with spring, we kind of already talked about, what we didn't see last season. And spring is kind of it's a great time. It's very important, but it's a weird time. And so is fall camp, because it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation. Because if a wide receiver makes a big play, then that means, hey, that defensive back didn't make a big play, So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that regard. But what are you hoping to see from this team as far as productivity? I mean, I kind of alluded to what I wanted to see, and that's tackling. I kind of want to see them be efficient tackling the football. And aside from that, on defense, it's kind of hard to measure, what else to see or to hope for on defense. But tackling is something that you can see. You can see when a missed tackle is a missed tackle, and you don't want to see that. And then on offense, you kind of, for me, you just don't want to see any drop balls, right? You want to see the offense be efficient, and you don't want to see drop balls. There were too many drop balls last season in the spring, and that showed up on the field in the fall. So those are some of the things that I'm hoping to see. What about you, Blue?
Well, I want to see them establish themselves, as you said, on the offensive side of the ball. And it'll all revolve around the quarterback position, and see how. And I really think that Van Dyke picks up the offense quite well. He's got to stay healthy, but I think he'll do it well, because he's got good quick release. He's got great vision. He's not, he'll use his running backs. He'll use them out of the backfield. I think that people are going to underestimate what he could do in an offense like this. This is a lot like Lashley's offense, but a lot more, I think, just more innovative and getting more people involved. So that's what I want to see on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, you hit it right on the head before. They had no depth. They couldn't make a tackle consistently. I mean, it went again. I mean, how many times did we sit up there in the press box and go, oh boy, here we go again? Yeah. After someone breaks one tackle, breaks another. Yeah. And we were back at 2021 again, Marcus.
I'm still having nightmares of that one play of Josh Downs for North Carolina breaking all those tackles. In a touchdown. But
it's kind of strange. What's going to happen? A lot of these people, I think that if things stay, and I think they got to stay healthy. That's the most important. That's the most important thing. If they could stay healthy, I think things will fall into place. I think just having a new outlook on both sides of the ball, and I think that, like you said, somebody like a Dawson, he's gonna be the type of coach that everybody likes. And Gaddis didn't endear himself to everybody. The assistant coaches, come on, let's be realistic. He never asked Frank Ponce for anything. And that's not the way you do it. In some ways I blame Mario Cristobal, because he needed to step in, and knock that down at the bud. But he's got to be receptive to the receiver coach, up front, everything. Running backs, they've all got to be on the same page. If they have some input, it's extra eyes. That wasn't the way it was run last year. And it's got to change, and it will, because like I said, I talked to people who coach with Dawson before and coached against him, and they said this guy's a dude. He's one of those. He's a player friendly type of guy who knows his stuff and he makes it fun. He puts the challenge on the kids. I don't think they had fun last year.
They did not have fun. They did not have fun last year. Last year was not a fun year. I mean, we've heard from some of the players saying it feels like they're in the military. And I mean, I guess the military could be fun, but that's not usually what you hear from players on your football team. So excited to see this team and really kind of see what they will be here in the spring. But give us some insight on the future, though, Blue. As far as I think you, besides myself and Frank, know more about what's going on the high school football gridiron and just some of the prospects that we're looking forward to see maybe in their senior year, 2024 kids, 25 kids. Which are some of the kids that you think Miami should target as far as from South Florida?
Well, obviously, 2 of the top 5 guys have early committed with Jeremiah Smith to Ohio State and TJ Capers to Louisville, but I think that could change. I think that could change dramatically. Josiah Trader, who seems to like Miami and seems to like what they're doing. Zaquan Patterson, who I think is without a doubt one of the best safeties. Maybe one of the best safeties anywhere. You talk about Dylan Stevenson, guy was at Killian. He's an edge rusher. He's up to 235, almost 240 now, which is impressive. Do you look at guys like Davion Gauze from Chaminade? But I think with the running game that they have and the 2 incoming freshmen this year, I think that they'll be pretty set. Did they go after a Stacey Gage from St. Thomas Aquinas? Did they go after a lot? Huh?
I said love Stacey Gage.
Yeah. You talk about an athlete, a guy who could play anywhere. What about Ja'Cory Barney? Probably one of the most appreciated players from Miami Palmetto. Could play up to 5-6 position. I think they're going to stay in that tight end mode, and they're going to put they're going to put a lot into Colton Heinrich from Cardinal Gibbons. I think this is a kid that has an opportunity, to be really, really special. So from a local standpoint, now you got somebody right in your own backyard, a kid last year who, it probably made quite a name for himself, the kid Randall at Daytona Mainland, who's now at Homestead, a wide receiver that makes catches, a guy that is an outstanding type of player. You have an edge rusher at Norland and Jeremiah Marcelin, who I think the world of. Dalen Russell, an interior kid from Columbus, who showed this year what he could do. LaWayne McCoy, who I think is as athletic a wide receiver as you're going to find. Did they go after a Nick Rodriguez from St. Thomas Aquinas, a kid who's an outstanding football talent? Maybe on the light side now, but he can get into the 220 range and, a sure tackler. Do you look at guys from outside the area? You look at more IMG guys. You look at Desmond Ricks, the cornerback from IMG. You look at, Ellis Robinson, who's another defensive guy. David Stone, who I think undoubtedly might be the best defensive lineman in the country. But guys who Miami's kind of targeted. The kid James Randall, as I mentioned, from Mainland, who's now at Homestead. This kid's big time. So Miami's got a lot of guys to look at, in the 2024 range. When you take a look at kids, that Tamaje Hayes from up at Melbourne, who they just got one of his teammates this year at O'Galley High School. So I think the 24 class is really, really loaded. They've kind of, I think they've kind of put into perspective where they want to go. And I think that when you take a look at getting a Ryan Mack or getting, somebody like that, or, a Brandon Jacobs from Orlando. So there's a lot of guys to choose from. In this 2024 class, 2025 wise, obviously there's some really good talent, in South Florida. I mean, you could look at any of these guys from around the state, but I think right now what Miami needs to do is they need to start targeting more and more young kids from this area, from South Florida, as they did in this last class. People are bitching and moaning, oh, they didn't get, but they did. They got 8, 9 kids from the South Florida. How many you want?
Yeah.
You gotta kind of understand that even when Miami was killing people back in the 80s and the 90s, they didn't get everybody. Right. It's just not always set up for that. But there's a lot of talent out there, Marcus. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. We'll see a lot more 2025 kids emerge. Right now they're just coming off of their sophomore year, and a lot of them really haven't made that impact yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to comment on one of the players that you talked about, Ja'Cory Barney. He's a player that, to me, at times outplayed Robbie Washington on the field. So that's a guy that I would love to see Miami really go after. Another really good wide receiver I just want to mention is Jose Leon. Leon is an outstanding receiver. He really kind of fits the mold of a lot of the slot receivers that they already have on the roster, as far as like Ray and Robbie and Rashard Smith. Like he's that type of player, and that's a player that I would like to see them kind of pursue as well. We could kind of talk all day as far as players are concerned, but you did see some players at the Orange Bowl showcase. So you want to talk about kind of what you saw there and just what impressed you?
Well, the thing that impressed me is the opportunity that these kids have to get another chance, to showcase what they could do. They've already got it done on the football field, or in the classroom rather. I mean, you look at guys who may not be household names, but I had an opportunity to watch kids like Gabriel Lenneman from Douglas, who really stepped it up and doesn't really have any place to go. Elijah Smith from Carroll City, and who I thought was good. Darryl Doctor, a lineman from Miami Palmetto, and Mark Wilder, who is a leading rusher in South Florida, maybe be a step slow, but certainly a guy who enhances his package because of what he brought to the table. And, to me, the important thing too, the Cornelius Colsey out of Westminster Christian, who I really was impressed with. But the one thing that really impresses me in the entire picture, Marcus, is, when it comes to a lot of these kids, is the opportunity for them to showcase their athletic ability right in front of coaches. And that's why I kind of frown on some of these small college recruiting fairs, because what they're doing is showing videotape of these kids from 5 months ago. And if you can't see them in front of you, because that 5'7", 5'8", 160-pound kid back in November, 5'10", 190 now. And his whole recruitability is a whole different, and you're getting a chance to see it. And there's smaller schools, but at the same time, because of the transfer portal, because of all these different recruiting methods, these kids are getting backed up, and a lot of really good kids are getting a chance to play at NAIA schools and Division II schools and, FCS schools. So, I thought it was well run. 400 kids showed up. While it might not be Miami and FSU and UCF and such, it is for the smaller schools, and they could really fill their roster with a lot of kids that you and I watched, for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's really a great opportunity. I'm glad they have this opportunity to really kind of showcase their talent, because, like you said, there's a ton of kids that really don't get the exposure that they need or deserve. Thanks to people like you, they get at least some exposure and really showcases like you went to with the Orange Bowl showcase, they have a chance to kind of
Right.
show a coach right there in real time what they can do. So good stuff there. I'm actually on my way to a baseball game tonight. The Miami
Oh,
baseball
nice.
teams, yeah, they're taking on FAU at FAU. So I'm going up to Boca to see them. The Hurricanes baseball team, they've been pretty impressive so
Yeah.
far, but the competition hasn't been as strong, so I think FAU is a really good test. They usually have a really good team every
Yes.
year, and then they're going to go to Gainesville to play the Gators for a 3-game series. So that's going to be a tough
Crazy.
one. Gators are ranked top 10 in the nation, so really excited about that. This is actually my first time really covering baseball, so it's been a pretty good time so far. But of course, CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. So we focus a lot on recruiting.
Yeah.
And Blue, you know about baseball recruiting in the area. Are there some guys that we should be knowing about as far as in the area that maybe the Canes should be looking at?
Well, first of all, I mean, I have had a chance to watch Miami so far this season, and I'll tell you what, they got some kids.
Yeah,
The
they got some
pitching's going to
power.
come around. I mean, I look at a lot of guys that I've covered, over the last couple of years, whether it be Jason Torres from Hialeah or the kid who used to play quarterback for Berlin, Dorian Gonzalez. I mean, you've got
Oh yeah.
power. You got big time kids, with power like Zach Levinson and guys like Dario Gomez and a guy that played at UNLV. And then now he came from Freedom High School out in Vegas. So you've got a lot of talent. As far as the guys coming up, I haven't really had an opportunity, but you could just see the kids that are draftable. There's for the 2023 class in South Florida, and American Heritage and Douglas and Calvary and a lot of North Broward Prep. I mean, as the spring goes on, they just had the classic, the BCA Classic, where Douglas won. A really good Douglas team. I mean, Coach Fitzgerald's always has his teams in the in the mix the whole year. I think it's going to be a pretty good year for them. Miami can only get basically who they could get. I mean, it's no longer one of those, no longer so easy to get these kids because it's, you only have a certain amount of scholarships. Miami's not, cheap to go to.
Yeah.
I mean, as time goes on, we'll join you and have a whole deal about some of the guys that I think, have an opportunity to, to be in the mix. I mean, you've got some really, really good kids from around that end up for in the Major League Baseball draft, and
Yeah.
that's another thing too. A lot of these kids are sold a bill of goods, saying, "Hey, you need to sign," and they don't often get their way to Coral Gables or Gainesville or Tallahassee.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to see that Miami schedule now will get a lot tougher.
Yeah.
Florida's always really, really good. FSU off to a 6-0 start. As you
Yeah.
mentioned, the FAU game is always going to be tough. FAU picks up a lot of kids, from South Florida as well. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
next time we
Absolutely.
join you, we'll give you a good rundown on some of the top baseball prospects in South Florida and in the state.
Yeah, definitely. One of the young guys on the team that I'm really really impressed with is Blake Sear. I mean, a kid out of Windermere,
Yep,
Florida. I
Orlando
mean,
area.
yeah. This kid he's dynamite, man. I mean, for as young as he is, being a true freshman, and for him to be as powerful as he is at the plate, it's really nice to see. This is a team that's got power from what I see so far. That the middle of the lineup is really, really powerful. Dario Gomez, just waiting for him to kind of get it going. with the bat. But other than that, I don't see a lot of flaws in this lineup when it comes to hitting the baseball. Now, pitching, yet to see how the pitching does against tougher competition. We will kind of want to see that first before we can make a real judgment on where this team can go and if this team can go to Omaha. But so far, so good when it comes to swinging the bat.
Well, think about this. They've played 8 games so far, and they have 22 home runs.
Right.
I mean, with Zach Levinson, as I said, and Sear, as you said, and the kid Yohandy Morales. I mean, all with a lot of pop to the ball. Carlos Perez. And I get a chance to watch these guys, and they're all up there and hitting. I mean, I think over the first couple of weeks, the first week and a half of the season, they had a 312 batting average as a team, and that's pretty damn good. I mean, when you take a look at it, and you're right, pitching is going to come, will come around. I mean, the Carson Ligon kid is going to be really, really good, and they got to get a lot more out of him this year. Ben Chestnut is another guy that we watched as well, but I think they're going to be fine. I mean, when a guy like Andrew Walters starts getting a little bit hot and he's more consistent, and the kid Alejandro Torres, I think Miami's going to be fine. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, sure is. I had my first Mark Light milkshake.
What'd you get? What kind?
I got the Columbus with it's basically kind of like a McFlurry type of shake. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I heard I talk to my guys all the time, and they told me that that's one of the perks, man. That's one of the perks.
Yeah, definitely. Larry, thanks again for joining me today on the Storm Tracker podcast. CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you follow this podcast on SoundCloud and of course on YouTube as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and follow CanesCounty.com on all social media platforms. Where can they find more stuff from you, Blue?
Well, you can go to Prep Red Zone Florida, which is our statewide stuff, or to LarryBlustein.com, which we do a lot of Dayton, Broward intensive things. We're on every week. I can't tell you what days on radio because because of the Miami Heat and the Panthers, they move us around. But we usually on a Monday night, 2 hours, we'll get you and Frank and, get a lot of the writers from the Hurricanes and people who cover Miami to give their perspective. And, it's a lot of fun. And then I do a podcast every Monday night at 8:30 called the Sixth Ring Canes, which is really good. I have a good time doing that with Jazz Santana and DJ Gillette and also and Vish. So, yeah, I'm keeping busy. I'm around the dial, and I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Blue. This is going to conclude the Storm Tracker podcast. Until the next episode.